may conform to a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne.
And good morning, good afternoon, good wherever you are on this beautiful blue planet. Seems like another year has passed in a week. It's about the best way to describe it. So much happening, but how much do you think you really need to get ready is the question. Now, how much? I went camping on Monday and Tuesday to test out some gear, thinking, all right, well, let's just test things and see how they work. A few things that were a drawback that, we forgot some things. We realized we needed a checklist, etc. That's why pilots have checklists in their cockpits so they don't forget anything when they take off in the airplane. You're not going to get it when you're up in the air. So, Ransom, I appreciate you joining me tonight. I'm right here with Ransom Godwin, as always, streaming live on Rumble and other venues across the scape. Vigilante TV, thanks for letting us join in. What a pleasure. Ransom, again, what are you thinking about today's speediness, if you will? Compared to last week, it seems like it's been a month.
Yeah, it does seem like time's slowing down, but it also seems like there's not enough of it to, like you said, how fast do we need to move here? And I'm thinking pretty fast because I'm trying to do a lot of projects all at once, so that by the end of the summer, whatever happens, I'm not going to worry about much actually. And going camping, that's excellent. I mean, you have to test out your gear, and you have to get out there with the realization, can I do this? Can I just live out here? I mean, if I have to just live on the actual earth as a symbiote being, can I do that? And the question for probably, I hate to say it, I'm going to say 7.5 billion people is no. The answer is no. They can't do it without a support structure, without some kind of civilization, with something. Only very few people know how to just live off the earth. So going camping is a great way to test all of that, especially going camping with minimal store-bought items, stopping to get a bunch of drinks and all of that. If you go with trying to find some water, I mean, of course, bring backup, obviously, but try not to use it. You bring your supplies, but you try not to use them. You see what you can do there. That is a great thing. And I'm trying to do the same thing with the farming. How much can I actually get in the ground? How much food can I get up this year in my little, small, semi-urban, semi-rural lot that I have that's, right around, I'm surrounded by people now. It's not really farming conditions, basically the entire area around my house, they laid probably, I'm going to say, half a foot of gravel on there. So I've been having to dig all that up everywhere I want to farm and everything. And it's just how many seeds can you put in the ground? How many can you pay attention to and be ready for the heat and the floods and God knows what happens in the stores. I'm sure you saw there's now a admitted worldwide rice shortage. They're saying it's the worst in supply in 20 years. Well, that doesn't really sound like a big deal when they put it that way. But when you say a global shortage of something, that indicates to me that there actually is a real shortage of it, meaning not enough's being farmed, not enough's being harvested, not enough stored, not enough delivered, not enough just in time. That's where I'm at. I'm tripping on how much can I produce this summer instead of worrying about too far in the future, connecting with the earth right now and seeing what I can do this year as far as prepping, but really just figuring out how to live on the land. I mean, basically that's what it is. If you can figure out how to just live on the little patch of dirt that you own and produce enough support that you just don't need that much of other things. You can learn to live without internet. You can learn to live without lights. All of that stuff is part of a make-believe matrix kind of we live in now. I mean, it's real, but at the same time, we were sitting here the other night and half of the valley just went dark about 3:33 in the morning. Oddly, it was so eerie that it just woke everybody up in a dead sleep. The quiet that happened instantly when all infrastructure and power got turned off. It was very bizarre. I went outside and, I was checking on my solar lights. Where's my flashlight? I got a flashlight. I got several flashlights, but where is it in pitch black? I actually thought, I might be having a stroke because, my eyes were completely open and I couldn't see anything until I got outside and, there's a little bit of starlight and I could see probably 15 miles away. They had power way over there. But that was a wake-up call for somebody that thinks they're prepped. I was stumbling around. It took me about 15 minutes, to get everything situated and try to figure out what exactly was happening. I mean, was it something big? It turned out, just the power was out. That's it, something with the power company. But who knows what that could be? An EMP, an earthquake hundreds of miles away. I mean, I don't know. Being prepared, though. I knew we could eat. I have fire. I have, protection. And I have the capability to leave this spot. So those are all the number one things to think about. And camping, it's like the best way to test out all of your equipment, try to use it. I wouldn't necessarily recommend using any of your supplies. You try to, make that trip about that trip so the supplies stay there. Anyway, enough of me rambling. On 420, it's a holiday to a lot of people around the world today. That's what time it is. It's 420.
Ramble. Yeah. Ramble. If we do it, it makes you feel good. This is one of those times in life and just the state of the world, whatever makes you feel good, do it. That's the way we're going to battle these dark forces back, is you stay in positive energy, positive vibration field. You got to do fun stuff that makes you feel good to get into that euphoric nature of things that sends out a counter wave to the darkness. It's called vibrational light and love, happiness. Those good feelings that people have. I was thinking about, I try to keep a flashlight in every single room. But still, if you're disoriented when you wake up, like another thing, they did a control. Maybe I told you this last week. They did a controlled burn in our area right here in East Tennessee, Forest Service. But I didn't get the message. I didn't see anything on the news. I didn't get any text messaging. It didn't say anything about that on like the Wonderground weather app or anything. Nothing. And in the middle of the night, and just it smells like smoke everywhere suddenly, and it's not a campfire or somebody's burning chimney. They just have a unique smell. You can, somebody's having a campfire, somebody's cooking something. It's a wood. This was a forest fire. It has a completely different smell to it, and it is so overpoweringly smoky. Waking up with that in the middle of the night, not knowing what is going on too, and then I'm glad I did have flashlights, get up and like, what is that smell? And walk outside and make sure the forest isn't glowing around the house somewhere. Imagine the fright in that. You get that smell and then all of a sudden you look over and the entire hillside's on fire and you didn't get a warning and you got to grab stuff and throw it out. That's where that mobility comes in. And, thinking about a pickup truck, if you have a 250-gallon tote, you got a pressure washer. Be your own firefighting, at least for grass fires. Those pressure washers, man, they just mist everything out and just spread it huge distances. Not a lot of people are thinking about, their own firefighting capability right around their own premises or little tiny area. A lot of things we're going to have to take back into our own control and hands again, especially if systems start to break down. Dollar's not there at the value it was, so people don't even want to go to work, because why would you when the U.S. dollar is trading at 10,000 to 1 of its prior value? And they're paying you $200,000 a day, which is like $20. But by the time your day's half over, it lost 50% of the value before lunch. this kind of, people aren't going to go to work. You're going to be on your own. I mean, community will help community, don't get me wrong. But in terms of having these giant firefighting forces in big cities and things, and just they won't pay. People will go away, unless it's your own local neighborhood. But things are just going to cease to function the way they did in the pinpoint to the way that they could direct vast amounts of resources, overage for a better term. But they won't have that overage anymore because everything will just stay within its own borough or neighborhood or whatever. And those lights and candles and lanterns. So, another note I wrote when you said that was, yeah, your light, like your first line of defense would be a quick flashlight, either on the wall or somewhere. But then, get a candle lit. And then I have lanterns. I got these old lanterns I bought in a estate sale. Still run on kerosene. If you don't tune them in, if you don't dial the wick down, you're going to get all the black smoke. So it's one of those old school kind, late 1800s, early 1900s. That is super long. I mean, you fill up that little receptacle there in the glass, you're burning for 8-9 hours straight. So leveling up on being able to expand your vision. What if you had a night vision scope? I mean, is that thing charged up or is that out of battery? Do you have it where you can peer out into the night and see people that are coming around? Even if you had like a thermal monocular or something, is it charged? That might be great that you have it, but is it charged? Like Ransom, I'll say one thing about you hit the most unique point there. We were so 180-degree opposite, but so in sync with the thought of the experiment. Bring as few supplies as you can and see if you can forage and whatnot. We were thinking something completely different. We had, fruit juice bottles, like orange juice, that are pretty large size, to fill them with different condiments. So green tea was one, water, the orange juice itself, but freeze it solid so you have a solid block of ice. And how long could you keep things cool in the coolers with no re-refrigeration and no ice bought and no ice put in? And that was the experiment. And at the end, it was like consolidating cool stuff to keep it cooler to consolidate cool stuff. But as you bring those bottles out and set them, just around, and it doesn't have to be directly in the sun, they'll slowly melt, and then that's how you drink. But to try to freeze everything first, and please remember, you can't have the bottle completely full when you do that, or else it'll expand and crack your plastic. You need to leave probably, 80% full, 85% full, allow for that, expansion of the ice. But not having supplies and trying to think that direction, and the answer for me, Ransom, is zero. I mean, at least for me, no, man. There just wouldn't be enough out there. You'd be eating vegetables a lot. Maybe you could trap something. You can't really hunt in national parks and things. So even if there's 20 other people there in the park with you, like we went off season, there's hardly anybody there. Just this huge giant area, like 10 people in this like square mile area. Even at that point, you'd all be looking for resources in the same place. So for us, it was like reading accounts of the 1930s when they went hunting way deep into the woods. It took them so long to get in there that when they had harvested an animal, whether it be a deer, a squirrel, whatever it is, they couldn't get it back out before it started to rot and go bad. That's how deep in the forest they needed to go. You're talking days and days and days walking into the forest to go hunting in the 1930s. That'll blow your mind. 1930s, this world was probably 50% more forest covered. And they went that far in and still couldn't find game, even the tiniest of things like, chipmunks and tiny sparrows, anything to eat. They couldn't get it out. So we were starting to think refrigeration. All right, well, what would you need to take in if you really needed to get somewhere deep in? Like, how long could you truly keep things cold for? Like, how do you reverse the feast? We went in with a plan to cook something for dinner, but then we realized quickly, stuff isn't staying nearly as cold as we thought. You got to eat this first. You got to rearrange everything and retool the dinner based on the melt. versus what you plan to have, and what went bad first, even though you didn't think it would go bad first. But I'm telling you, Ransom, maybe what we could, we could find some, hands full of clover. The leaves were just coming out. There were fiddlehorn ferns there. Could have eaten a bunch of those. I mean, they're the most ferns I've ever seen in one single place ever in my life. It was the most amazing, those curled up ferns. You got to get them while they're still curled up and harvested. Man, there were thousands and thousands of them. Thousands, like seriously, like patch after patch after patch. You would have found some food for this season, but it would have pretty much been nibbled up. So I don't know, man. I'm rambling now, so I let you back. But Ransom, I hope I answered the question, because strange things happen in strange places. 4.5 earthquake in the middle of the Atlantic, in the middle of the plate, not even a boundary edge. So they're wondering if a volcano is starting to form like a punch through, like in Hawaii.
Or a sub met another sub and they had a boom boom underwater. I don't know. I'm just saying that's possible. It's right about the right magnitude, right? If somebody tested something possibly. The other day that sent me down a whole rabbit hole. I was just looking at, I thought we've talked a lot about what would happen with a small exchange of nuclear war, how dead would the earth really be? I mean, like what would it be like? And, if they only let, say, 10 to 15 off and sacrifice some cities, some areas, possibly for different reasons, I don't know, like failed industrial cities that are a lost cause, and whatever. There's plenty of targets that, they might hit for population reasons. But you realize that they've already exploded like 2,000 something. So anyway, this earthquake off the coast, I looked at the magnitude and I looked at the location, and, obviously maybe something fell off the shelf or there was an earthquake, that there was, for whatever reason. It's hard to find a reason for that exact spot, or like you said, a new volcano popping up, a hot spot or something like that. But I also thought, that's the same area in the ocean that they talked about. They had to down a plane, and a nuke almost went off out there, and then closer to the thing. And a few years ago, Lindsey Graham was saying, what would it be like if a nuke just went off the coast of, South Carolina? And, you get these comments. So I was thinking, what if they just popped one out there? How likely is it that they would just put one in a place like that to test something without telling anybody really about it? So I go through this list of 2,000 nukes that we did. And, I start seeing places like Georgia, Colorado, a bunch of places I didn't even know they did it. So they popped like 3 in Colorado trying to make a new valley and some stuff. Like, so they're experimenting all over the place with these nuclear weapons. So, and then you have the tensions of today. And I don't doubt that people in China and people in Russia, heard about this earthquake and we're wondering maybe some of the same ideas. Did they just pop a nuke off over there, or or was that a warning to us? I mean, there's no telling exactly what that is. I'm sure it was something geologic. I'm just saying, what a theory. It could have happened, but I was sitting here thinking that the other night when the lights went out, just boom, dark. And so I get my flashlight, I go outside, all my solar lights are working, and I realize I'm one of the only people around that has a bunch of lights in their yard that work. Everybody else is in the dark. You can see foams moving around in their houses because that's the only flashlight they have, right? And I didn't even use my flashlight because my eyes adjusted. I have solar lights or whatever. But I was thinking, we kind of stick out like a sore thumb when all the lights go out, because we're the only ones with backup lights if the power goes out. So obviously that might not be a good idea as far as that goes if you're worried about security or whatever. Too many solar lights, yes, they're helpful, but at the same time you stick out in the dark because, hey, look at those people over there. They got lights. And if they got lights outside, they probably have everything else together in their life. I'm just saying. So they probably have their stuff together. But then again, there's silly people that are not afraid of firearms. They're not afraid of overwhelming force, and they'll still try to attack people and take their stuff. And it's kind of a silly venture, in my opinion. Um, so you talk a lot about people coming from the city, and they probably wouldn't do much out there in the rural areas. And I tend to agree with you on that. It'll be people from the rural area that also live out there that will be trying to jack other people's stuff, because they know the area, they know the people, they have a little intel on what they got out there, because they probably go squirrel hunt and do this and that and check out people's property around the edges and from locations not everybody knows about. And more of this kind of stuff is going on. So when I see the lights go out, and I'm thinking, it's not an EMP, obviously, because I can see 15 miles away they have power. So I know it's a power grid problem. But can you imagine if all of the lights went out immediately, just all of them, and you couldn't see nothing? So you can imagine bumbling around with your solar lights and your flashlights. And if you don't live in a rural area, you're not in the privacy that you think you're in. So there's going to be all of these people looking at you. That was a side tangent there. So I was going to ask you about, what do you think about our Treasury Secretary Yellen saying that we cannot decouple from China? And what do you think the odds are that China will decide to go to war with us, regardless of what we think's going on?
Yeah, I think that the first 48 hours of an emergency, everything's going to be new and chaotic for everybody. So nobody will have a chance to really organize yet to try to, you get a good 48 hours of safety period. And then that third day, that 72 hours, then everybody's realized what's going on, and then things change. Then they're looking for resources like ways to get out of city. So your first 48 hours generally are the safest time to travel. Immediately after that, if you know what's going on, you're generally, and I'm not going to say all the time, but generally going to be unmolested during travel for at least the first 48 hours. It's just when that third day, it starts to get into, you better be much more aware. The fourth day, people are sort of scrambling to get out of the way. And then the fifth or sixth day, and if it's like that, people are getting hungry and they're actually, coming and knocking on doors looking for things. Doesn't take long to get a gang together. Come on, guys. Yeah, you come with us. Yeah, we're going to go look for food, and it would take no time at all to get groups of people together to go do that. So when you were talking about the lights to adjust them, that first day, you might have that the first night, bring those solar panel lights down in, because it connects over to that account called the Year in Hell, when they were in Bosnia, and it was in Sarajevo, and then the city got ringed in, and they were in there for like a year and a half, and everybody was locked in the city. One thing was, even if they had candlelight or some means to have any kind of light, to use trash bags to cover the window, because as soon as somebody saw a light, after like a weeks or a month after the breakdown, they had to live in there for like a year and a half with no supplies, nothing. So even having a candlelight put you at risk. And they would always look for things to cover windows with routinely. Different ways to hang things and plastics and, tarps and put it over. You don't want anybody to see. So that first night, you grab those lights and bring them down. And then, part of your time the next day is bringing off a few rooms with black plastic bags over the windows where, nothing penetrates out, nothing. You could be happy as a clam in your house with lights in your rooms, but nobody outside could see that you had anything on inside. Like we have a log cabin, maybe some light will seep through a crack or something like that. But generally, you can get most homes, modern homes, with sheetrock in them, pretty, light tight. Like no light's going to leak outside. That kind of goes in with what you were saying there. It would be a target because you're prepped out, because you had the lights. But the first night, again, people are going to be so freaked out trying to figure out what went wrong or get their own affairs in order. Somebody might take a note or so, but if you leave it on the second night, then you're asking for problems. That should be down immediately in the morning, or even if you know, yeah. And I wouldn't leave it up and bring it inside, and that's your emergency lighting. You can recharge that every day. Like, you don't need it. You can actually put that little solar panel, just like, sneak it through a window and put it out and recharge it, and then you got light in your home every single night. So anytime I have a chance to buy like those string lights or something, and I know a lot of people do because it's super easy backup light. We're using it for the barn. Anything solar is awesome for lights. They're portable. You can take them anywhere. They can be repurposed a million ways. All you need is another nail to hang it up. I mean, versatile use thing, unbelievable. And yeah, I don't think many people would be ready. And yeah, there were stories of dudes out here in the countryside, yeah, lerping on people's properties. Still goes on, but again, I'll say people in the countryside also know where people in the countryside are shooting every day on their properties. Like, there's a sound resonance in the forest that everybody hears it, and that's kind of the ring. Stay away from that sound. So there's an unwritten rule there. I guess it's called common sense, maybe. But what other things could be used, Ransom, do you think? Like the emergency lights, something that you could, take with you to enhance your life in the event of something happening? A water filter? I don't know. Fill me in. What do you think?
Well, that's like one of those no-brainers. I mean, you were talking about the forest fire stuff. That's exactly why I have certain items in several different bags, not just for me, but also other people, because sometimes you're going to need more than one person to deal with a certain situation. But the water straw, or various forms of it, I like the water straw. You need that. I mean, literally, you could just about drink out of any dirty puddle you find in the forest, and you'll be fine. You find a lake, great. You find a stream, great. But you can even get it out of places you probably wouldn't think of. But as long as it's not petroleum or stuff like that, that's going to ruin the filter. I mean, dirty water is one thing, but chemical laced water is something else. It may actually filter it out. I'm not sure what they're claiming, but I would suggest trying to find a clean water source and then drinking it. But about the lights, so if you've ever driven down a country road, and you see, when you drive by certain people's properties, you'll see a bunch of their lights that come on, motion lights, sensor lights, stuff like that, motion activated solar lights, etc. And if you notice, some people set it up to see where they're going at night. So they set it up on the paths that they walk. They put it over their buildings. They put it on their porch. They put it in all these places. The problem with that, in my opinion, and other smart people, because if you also drive down dirt roads, you'll notice every once in a while you see somebody's house that's completely dark, yet all of their lights and activated solar lights and motion lights, they're pointed outward a little further away from their property. And I'll tell you a little secret why that is. It's because they want to stay in the dark. If someone attacks their property, the lights are shining on people way away from their house, lighting up people further away from your surroundings by your house. So you'll be notified when they're way away from your house, because lights start coming on the borders and boundaries of your property. And they can see you, but you got a big light shining in your face. So those people that come out and are checking out properties, there's a difference between, like I said, people that set up their lights so they can see where they're going and stuff, and they really don't have a concern about that kind of thing, obviously. But in a real scenario, you'd want to know, and you'd want to be that guy that has the dark house with the lights out on the edges of his property. And the reason for that is because there's a clear line of sight right to the things that are being illuminated. And, I'm sure you know what I mean by that. But anyway, you can see them, they can't see you. And if you practice walking around your property, everywhere you go, you should walk in some of the same exact places, so you know exactly every sound, every little dip, every it's muscle memory of your own property. So you can literally run around in the dark before you can even see, and know that you're not going to trip over or fall over or do any of that stuff if you're being attacked. But if you're having to leave, which is going to be inevitable for millions of people, you're going to have stuff in your bag that's just going to get you along, which is obviously some source of fire, and clothing that will protect you against the elements, because you're not only going to have to hide probably. You're not going to want everybody knowing where you're at because you have a big fire going. You're going to want to be dry though. So I'm suggesting Gore-Tex. And these are the same things that military people are trained. I mean, they're trained to have this item, this item, and this item, and this item. And the reason they're trained for that is because there's use for each item, and they may come into a circumstance where they're going to need exactly that. You're going to be able to eat. And you're not going to, necessarily find food. So you're going to have some really compact nutrients, something that you can take with you. And you might be gone for long term. You never know. No telling what kind of scenario may happen in the future. Hopefully, we'll just go along hunky dandy, like everything's going to be all right forever. But it just doesn't appear that way. I see across the board in the financial markets, people talking about the dollar popping. It's going to pop. It's been predicted going to be popped for I don't know how long. Everybody knows the system is set up to where the wealth goes up and it stays there, and the wealth that goes down, becomes less and less. The value of the money's less and less. The cost of all of everything goes up. So right now, what happens if you just go to the store and there's no rice because there's a global rice problem? So you're like, oh, well, that's no big deal. I don't really eat rice, right? Guess what? A lot of the rest of the world eats rice. And guess what happens whenever they run out of their main staple? Well, they're going to start eating other kinds of foods. And when they do that, that impacts the market, obviously, because now there's a shortage of other things that millions of people don't normally eat. But because they have a shortage, now they're buying other things. And I could see that dominoing. And not only that, for the people that are like, no big deal, I don't eat rice. When there actually is a food shortage, you'll realize that rice and beans and all of these other things that people really don't like to eat on a regular, which is weird because it's like the healthy food. They'll realize that they can't go get that now, that they think it's a good idea. Maybe I should go buy a big tub of lard. Maybe I should go buy a giant bag of rice. Maybe, a 20-pound or 3 or 4 20-pound bags of beans, just to have them sitting around in your house collecting dust in the cabinet. But when and if the lights do go out, or the money becomes worthless, or we do indeed go into a thermonuclear war with one of two superpowers that have nuclear weapons. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it could happen. They could pick out, several different targets without going to a full-scale nuclear war. And believe me, these countries have already tested these scenarios above the ground, in the atmosphere, in the water. They've been doing it. And, that's just a theory about what could have happened in the Atlantic Ocean. But don't knock your governments. They do indeed do weird stuff right out in the open. If you don't believe me, you can go look up the history. I know there's several lists out there of all of the times that nuclear weapons were used in the United States, and it'll blow your mind. Most people think it was out here at Trinity Site in New Mexico by where I live. That's the famous one. And a lot of people know about the ones in Nevada and stuff at the testing grounds way out there away from everybody. But no, they're blowing them up under cities, right next to cities, stuff like that. They blew up some in Los Lunas underground. I mean, like some in Georgia. It's amazing what the people don't know about what's actually going on in the world. And whenever you look at the geopolitical environment that they're telling us about, that they're admitting to, that they're pumping through the media, that no, we're about to go to war in Africa, we're going to war in the Middle East, we're going to war in the Slavic countries in the Shatter Belt between Russia and Western Europe. So NATO's all in on that. And China, they've been saying for a long time, we're going to take back Taiwan, the renegade state of China. And it looks like, for all intents and purposes, they basically are doing that. And I don't think the U.S. is going to do anything about it, because we're so tied up in the economy right now that's why our Treasury Secretary is saying exactly that, if we go to war and China doesn't do good, then we don't do good. Because since Nixon, we've been destroying our own economy in favor of the Chinese capitalist communist system. Kissinger, Klaus Schwab, all of these people are in on it. It's just a question of which people are going to get to rule the one world order that they've established and that they're putting on it. And I was showing this article. I was going to send it to you. It's a Brazil. It's article from Brazil, so it's in Portuguese, but in English it says lotteries of houses with zero cost will start tomorrow. And you look at the picture, and there's these little tiny homes, with a water jug on top for their shower, and everybody's packed together. While you look around them, and there's millions of acres of forest and farmland with nobody on it, and they're trying to pack everybody in these little what I recognize as a ghetto. The classic term of it from the 40s, and also the present day term of it now, where you have rows and rows of government housing. The projects is what we called them here, where all of the poor people live and all of the people with mental disorders. And I hate to say it, but every little branch of people that couldn't make it into society, whether they had mental problems, psychological problems, physical problems, poverty problems, criminal problems, whatever it is, the reason that they couldn't make it in society. And then they shove them all in these little areas and give everybody some food stamps and a little bit of money, just enough to pay the bills that they give them. And recently, I don't know if you saw it, but they just had a video that was produced. It's on YouTube. It's called After the Reset. I forgot exactly. Beyond the Reset is what it's called. Do yourself a favor and watch that. And it's a satirical. It's not really that satirical, but it's supposed to be satirical future based on current events. And when you look at it, it is exactly what these global elite want for us. It was funny because they had like bugs instead of meat bags that were delivered by the government. It was, and then after a while, I guess they ran out of the bugs. So it was beyond bugs. It's all beyond belief, man. Fake meat, fake vegetables, everything's tainted. You're going to have to grow your own. We're entering into this Aquarius time, and I see it as a real pivotal singularity in human history where the food supply is changing forever. And if you don't fight back and take control of your food right now, it'll be gone forever. I hope that's not too gloom there, but that's how what I see them forming. And I'm just trying to figure out, how do I opt out? How do I not put my kids in that system?
Food is gone forever. That's a recipe for disaster. I try to throw that one in there. Keeping it light, Ransom. Keeping it light, trying to. That rice shortage is going to be a thing. Now, I'm going to take you back to the Hunga Tonga eruption, and I know I'm beating people on the head with this, mentioning it every show, but if you take a look at the NASA ozone. Now, Ransom, if I could ask you a huge favor, if you can go over to, just put in your search browser, NASA ozone, and you'll have the ozone watch page come up. And then you look at today, I think the latest one they have is the 18th, at least the last time I was on the site. Look at the 18th. And that'll show you right now in April, approximately how much ozone is down over the Antarctic and at the bottom half of the southern hemisphere. Now, there's also a tab up there that will allow you to go back in time. So just go back to 2021, just 2 years ago, and take a look at the April 18th diagram of how much ozone, how many Dobson units are there. And you'll see something startling, that we're already getting into what would be ozone depletion column time that generally doesn't start until August. This mesospheric ice crystal cloud event, for a better term. For those of you who don't know about the event, it was the eruption in the middle of the ocean that shot water vapor up, not the general normal ash and sulfur dioxide. Yeah, there was a little bit of that, but there was so much water vapor that went up that pretty much got washed out of the column pretty quickly compared to just no water vapor eruption. But the eruption was so violent, It shot water vapor crystals all the way up 180,000 feet into the atmosphere. And it's in this layer called the mesosphere. And it creates these clouds, these flat little surfaces of ice crystal clouds. And the ozone breaks down on that. So the more of those ice crystal clouds, the more ozone will be broken down. So that was the call, is as we come into August, September, October, November of this year, the UVB radiation will be ground striking an enormous amount of places, way more toward the equator than usual. This will be the world's largest story at the end of the year. This is going to be on every single news page of every headline. It is the most talked about event ever, and they're going to try to blame it on humanity somehow. There'll be a new reason. Instead of chlorofluorocarbons, it'll be something else that has caused this runaway ozone. Whatever, they're going to use it as the end times horse is riding. Another, horse of the apocalypse just left the stable. There's a catastrophic ozone depletion event in the southern part of our world's getting cooked by UVB radiation that's affecting all the plant life, i.e. more rice production, Uruguay. I mean, look at Uruguay, rice production next to Argentina. And they were down 50%. Rain patterns are way off across the southern hemisphere. But what's interesting, though, is the centrifugal force, however you think our Earth's magnetic field works, and how cloud cells form from 0 degrees at the equator and go to 30 north, and that whole convection system. There's been a huge amount of extreme 7 times more rainfall events. This place, Guyana, is a good one to look at. They got 7 times more rainfall than normal. And you look at some areas in northern Brazil where they might be doing rice also, huge exponent of 5 times more rainfall than normal. Then you start to look at the equatorial areas around Indonesia. Man, it was a super soaker event, like way above the normal for their normal monsoons. I mean, dumping monsoons that just really showed the vulnerabilities of Jakarta. If it's going to keep raining this hard for much longer, then you can't have record floods in the city. I mean, and then a 5x higher record flood in the city. And these rain events are showing the vulnerability of not only our infrastructure, but think about it on the other side of the planet. But the entire equatorial region, the rainfall patterns and atmospheric, whatever it is, a cavitation, because please, I didn't understand this until I really wrapped my head around it. That eruption in one day put 10% more moisture into the atmosphere in one day. It added an extra 10%. And all that extra water vapor is having an effect on how the atmosphere is flowing, how the cloud cells are, moving from the equator to 30 degrees north and 30 to 60 degrees north and south both. But think about the drag on that. Think about super clean, dry air, how much faster it moves than really saturated, very thick, wet air like fog. Try to super dense, foggy morning you're driving. That kind of denseness compared to like the brightest, clearest, sunniest day you've ever had. Like the difference in medium is what we're talking about, the difference of the medium of the actual starting of the cloud cells of our planet now. So as you look at those droplets that are everywhere, this is why rice production could be off, because you're equatorial up to, say, 7 degrees north latitude, 7 degrees south latitude, a huge amount of rice production's in this area. You look at the monsoons being off in Thailand and the dry seasons, floods in the dry season, like super wreck, like literally chest high water in the middle of the dry season. That is so far insane. What was going on last year anyway? Now the effects of this Hungatonga are really starting to hit. So what you're seeing is not a rice shortage. That is the effect. What you are truly seeing is 10% more water vapor now drowning our agricultural areas that were normally farmable with moderate rains and moderate monsoons. This water vapor is not coming out for a few more years. So, however the patterns take on right now, if it continues through next year, and another thing that's happening too, that's unaccountable, nobody understands why, are what they're calling these mega hail events. Grapefruit-sized hailstones coming down in dozens and dozens and dozens of places, all right now in this same week at the same time. Like, you get hail, don't get me wrong, it's baseball size hail used to be an extreme event. Grapefruit size, that's a whole nother league, and it might happen once, twice in a year, but not literally 30, 40 different locations on the planet in just a week or two. Something has changed in our atmosphere, absolutely. So the distraction would be, and I'm calling it Ransom, the distraction, here we go. The distraction will be there's a rice shortage, because they only have to cover up between now and the ozone hole depletion event in August. Because if they come clean, they can focus on the rice shortage and the starvation, the rising prices, and the fist fights in the supermarkets and the government lines. Did you see the video of the line in Afghanistan of the women waiting to get flour? That thing was stretched for like half a mile, maybe more. Single file, standing super close so nobody can cut in front of you, to wait to get flour at the local, granary or government provisioned flour on a ration. That's going to continue with the rice. But what they're not going to tell you is that's going to be global, and that's going to continue for a couple years. Then they're instantly going to be right into the ozone depletion event. Now, how do these two dovetail and mix together? I'm not sure. You're a smart guy. You can usually figure that stuff out. So I'm all ears. How do you think they're going to connect all these events together to run in these next 2 to 4 months?
Well, it's climate change, mate. The SUV did it. No, they've been doing it. I mean, they have the same answer for everything. It's that, human beings bad, eating traditional foods is bad. If you drink milk, you're racist. If you eat beef, you're racist. Like, they have all of these different ideas that's just attacking normal human behavior. So, they'll keep everybody distracted with that. And I think one of the next.
Could I, real quick, was that racist? RASSIS? Is that how you spelled that? That's racist, right?
Racist, yeah. No, I don't know. It's just that it was one of the articles I was showing on Zero Hedge. People are, I don't know why. I guess because only a certain portion of the world can drink it, and some people are lactose intolerant because they don't carry the gene. So I guess that's the thing that they're saying it. But I thought, because, I remember 5 years back, and I'm not a goldfish, when they were running articles saying it was racist because it was just white. I mean, it was just white milk. It never did nothing to nobody. It was just there and it existed. But none of that is real. It's just all different ways to try to make people feel guilty so that they don't want to buy into natural foods and healthy lifestyles. Instead, there's nobody out there complaining that Captain Crunch or, any of that stuff is bad. Don't worry about that. You go eat that sawdust. It reminds me every time I go into the grocery store, not to be gross or nothing, but when I used to read about the Romans having to eat gruel, like some wheat and some barley, and they just mixed it around with some mud and cooked it up. And there you go. I bet they had great probiotics, however. But that's similar to what's going on right now. And, there's other times when they've put sawdust in products like bread and meat and different things and sold it because it's rationing. And there's going to be a time, and mark my words, because I've been watching it all across the board. Hacker this, hacker that. Right now, the air traffic controllers in Europe or I think it was the UK, all turned off. All the planes have to stay down because somebody hacked their stuff. Now, mark my words, in the next several months, there's going to be major hacking happening in the financial sector, probably they've been pushing for the idea of a military, bigger type hack that turns off a large portion of society, like maybe the infrastructure, like a grid or a dam or, something like that. But wait till for some reason, hackers decide to attack the food exchange or something that has to do with, trade between countries, or even hacking something that questions the value of things where it shuts down trade between countries. And I'm just wondering, if there's a world global rice shortage, why? And, is there a normal reason? Is it the reason you're talking about is like a natural cycle? Or is it that, all of these other events that they've been doing is a controlled burn or a controlled demolition of society altogether, where they're just slimming down the amount of things that people can do and can eat, and the amount of power that they have. They're even going so far to try to convince people to pay for different things that have to do with the global climate crisis and your CO2 footprint on the earth. And, if you just rationally think about that with critical thinking skills, a little deductive logic, you would come to the conclusion that they have thrown a scam at you to charge you for breathing. So it's like that old movie Meatballs, where they got to fly up with a big vacuum cleaner and suck out all the air until we pay the bill. And then, we can have some of the air back. Or better yet, they could start selling air in a can like they do water in a bottle. Whoever came up with that idea, hey, let's give people the grossest water on the planet, and we'll hike the prices up where it costs. Like I've been in stores where a little bottle of water is like $4, and then next to it is alcohol that you can get for like $1.99. It's like a 40. So you could drink corn syrup malt liquor for cheaper than you can get some water. The gallon of gasoline outside is slightly cheaper than that bottle of water. And there's no reason to ship that bottle of water from Fiji all the way over here anyway. You know what I mean? I mean, we could clean water and have it right here for cheaper than anything. I constantly go to the water stations they have here in the desert because it's a necessity. So they offer machines up everywhere with reverse osmosis. Now, what happens when that gets turned off or they're no longer doing anything? Imagine all the people that are going to be freaking out when the municipalities, the water's off because the power's off. And that means the machines are off. That means the deliveries are off. And that means there's no water at the water station either, because it doesn't work because it runs on electricity.
Yeah, what if they start denying you access to a spring near you that you used to rely on? Then what? I mean, you can force your way into the spring, I guess. It's usually a pipe that's just coming out somewhere on somebody's land that they let people go to. But what if it came down to like an armed guards there? You're not allowed to get water out of here. Then what happens? You go down. I guess it would depend on how heavily infiltrated an area was. I mean, at that point where they would put a guard out in front of the spring and tell everybody no water, just because no water, we're going to control your access to water, and nobody can get water from here. Even though the spring's been running for 120 years and everybody gets water out of there, you can no longer just from today use it anymore.
It's contaminated.
No, yeah, it's contaminated from nuclear exchange, man. It's so contaminated, it'll be 6,000 Earth lifetimes before you can even breathe one molecule of the air, is what they want you to think. They kind of bring it down like that. But when it comes to natural resources, then what? I mean, what is really going to happen if they try to station people out in the countryside and be like, all right, just guard you and it would probably be one person in the beginning and they'll disappear. Then it'll be like 4 people out there that'll have to guard the station. And then what happens if those 4 disappear? Then what? How many levels of control could there really be controlling an area? Because I read a little war about the Civil War historian, or like the history of it. I like to see, because when I was growing up, there was this old Civil War highway in our backyard, and sometimes you'd find things, they were worth nothing, but it was, it be able to find an old belt buckle that was already like completely rusted to almost shredding to nothing, but it still had the square shape. You know, you see some of these treasure hunter shows, they're out the metal detectors in old home sites that are now huge forest areas or whatever, grew up over 100 years, and they're finding all kind of cool stuff. And no, never found that.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
I've never realized a time that was more necessary to make sure you have a backup of food than there is right now. We see all of the food markets going expensive, every item. And some of these items that they offer in these kits are approximately $1.50 to $2 a meal or serving, which is quite a bit cheaper than anything that you're buying now. I'm really interested in the protein pack, because this is where, even if you're gardening and you're not going to have these proteins, but you can stack them back. And this thing has chicken, beef, eggs. So it has a lot of protein that maybe you could mix with the stuff that you're growing. I'm really thinking that this summer is going to be starting all of the hard times as far as it is for people with food. So I think this, beyond any other time that you've thought about buying storable foods, is probably the occasion to give yourself some insurance so that when hard times come and the trucks stop coming, you have a backup plan. At least you have nutrition to get you by. And some other people are not going to be doing that. They're going to be having difficulties and maybe even finding themselves in aggressive situations with hundreds of other people trying to get supplies that are no longer there. And these kits have everything. Fruit, you got the meat. It's all stuff that you're going to need to survive. The insurance that people need right now, I just don't think there's ever been a comparable time other than maybe when, you know, we had soup kitchens in the 20s and right again in the 40s when things were becoming thin again. And we're in that time now. And when you start looking at world events, you can see that the food supply is going to be tied up with multiple different events around the globe. And you don't have to worry about those things if you have this taken care of. You can get 6 weeks, you can get months, depending on the size of your family. This is definitely insurance for survival, because other people are going to be fighting over the scraps that are left at the store, and you don't have to do that.
Yeah, you mentioned something there, the seeds as well, to be able to grow some of your own food in addition to having stored foods. But when it goes down, it is going to go down, and things that you think about it right this second. You know, everybody's talking about buying gold and silver as a way to hedge against inflation or be able to have something to be able to pay your property taxes in the future. With the devaluation of the currency, well, it will be the exact same thing. Now, do you have enough money to buy an ounce of silver? Perhaps you do. It's the same thing with food preps. You know, the 1 week kit compared to something like a full 6 weeks kit or a 12-week kit. Even if you get just one small minimal thing to add to your stack. You know, I talk to people who prep all the time. It's always about tools, storable foods, water filtration, and a way for you able to store water and filter it at the same time. Because if you can get that closed loop enough, there's always going to be somebody that will help you garden with those seeds. Heirloom seeds is where you want to go. Heirloom open pollinator seeds. Because at the end of the day, when you collect those seeds at the end of your season for growing, you want to be able to store those and then have them so you can replant next year. I think that supply chains are going to start constricting even further. I mean, look at the way that the world laid out. These really incredibly complex supply chains are now starting to fracture in the middle of everywhere. You know, political strife. We didn't even talk about the ozone depletion event that's going to wipe out food production further in the Southern Hemisphere. The tipping point. Humanity's here. We're seeing it everywhere. So how do you protect your friends and family? Because you got to think everybody has survived. We would not be here having this conversation if people had not survived the last 8,000 or 10,000 years of events that were far greater than what we're going to experience. It just takes a little prepping, a little bit readiness, and I do believe that we'll be able to get through this.
You know, when we're talking about these seeds and the storable foods to go with it, you're going to have to probably invest in both of these ideas. When you go through the list of the seeds that they give you, these heirloom seeds, they're the best type of food that you could possibly get or grow yourself. But you have this backup of the food storage that lasts 25 years.
And that's heavensharvest.com. Use the code ADAPT at checkout. That's ADAPT. Take 15% off your order.
Whatever comes your way, weather, war, whatever it is, you're prepared, you have security. At least you know that your belly's going to be full so that you can continue on the work that needs to be done to stabilize everyone's life around you.
Of many Ice Age conversations. I'm your host right here with Ransom Godwin tonight, David DuByne. We're starting it off. You know, that was the thing just before the second hour break. I was trying to explain that even in the Civil War in the 1860s, you have to think everything was really, really, really remote then. Like people were riding horses. There really weren't a lot of roads around. But it was, you know, between horse carriages and horses. You have to think today's world comparatively. Either it could be a blessing that there's so many homes and there are so many roads and there is so much habitation and there are so many buildings and cities and towns that to be overrun like it was in the 1860s, there might have been very few places to go, but it seemed like everywhere got hit in the South, everywhere. And there was a famous saying, like Sherman went through Georgia. Like you would consider it like the tiniest burg, just in the middle somewhere, like 3 buildings and like a water mill to grind some flour and a boat landing or something, and they burned it to the ground. Nothing. You know, the most remotest of the remote, even in today's terms, like you had to come up a river and like another stream and you had to take horseback and today you can just drive to it, but completely, razed to the ground. So you look at it, you wonder, could it happen with the amount of stuff today versus, in the 1860s, it was really, really sparsely populated, but there wasn't that much that could destroy it all. It seems like there's some sort of formula here that I'm maybe missing part of, an algorithm. But Revolution Radio, thanks for letting us talk about it tonight. A lot of stations would have, had a problem with this content because it doesn't adhere to a lot of narratives that are established that you're supposed to believe. We have our own free thoughts and, connecting ideas together, which foster different thoughts. And to be able to discuss those, well, we should be able to, especially in this time and age and change that we're seeing. So, Ransom, you think like, an invading force, I'm not even going to call it just a force, could run through with the same consolidation and the same amount of damage in modern day as they could in the Civil War, running through super remote, incredible remote locations?
It'd be worse than that. I mean, you're talking about people that lived outside. They still hunted. They still lived hard. Most people didn't even have electricity. Most people were poor, despite popular belief. A bunch of people weren't the super rich plantation owners, or in the North, they weren't, super rich people either. The majority of the people that were fighting that war were regular, average, poor Americans. And it was so brutal by today's standards. I mean, even, we use technology and people are killing people from far away. They're not really looking at it. They're pushing buttons. They're launching it out of tubes. We have scopes and things that, allow you to take care of people a long ways away. And, if you, most of the time they're not thinking about there being a person on the other end of that. It's just a silhouette. It's just a target. Because even snipers and things, they know about the idea that, when you're alone and you feel like someone's watching you, a lot of times that's actually what it is, because observation changes what you're looking at, and that's a real phenomenon. So when snipers would look at a scopes, like say in Vietnam, they would pretend they were silhouettes, so that evidently, those people wouldn't know they were there, because there's a weird seemingly phenomenon that if you realize there are people through the scope, the people know that you're there somehow. But besides that, you compare that to what was going on in the Civil War, and these were totally different people. These were people that lived a hard life already. They knew about nature, so they could survive out in between stuff. And when they hit a town, they destroyed it. All the kind of invasion from the Northern troops or the Union into Georgia when they were starting to win the war. And, Grant and everybody was in agreement, all of them, that, you're going to destroy them. You're going to starve them out. You're going to shut it down. It's over. It was brutal. And not only that, when the Southern troops were attacking, more along the Mason-Dixie where people were considered more Union citizens, I guess. They were being harsh too. They were burning down people's houses. They would catch people alone and strip them in the woods. It was horrifying. So if you think about that on modern times with I hate to say it, that there's definitely a predator-prey society now more than ever, I think. And that's because people have become sheeple and they rely on all of the systems of modern civilization to survive. And they really don't even have it in their mind what they would do without certain things. Like, where do I get food from? Oh, well, you just go to the refrigerator, or you go to the store, or you pick up the phone and you call Uber Eats or Pizza Hut, or, all of those things are basically fantasy make-believe in a world with no electricity, where the government has shut down, where the water systems aren't working, so anything that makes that happen. Ask anybody that lived right after hurricane. Thank God that in hurricane and tornado situations, you have an entire nation behind them, and a government that can bring aid and people that can bring aid, even though in prior years we've seen that government it's not really that good at it. So you have to help yourself. So if in today's world that was happening, you would only meet the predators. You're not going to meet the prey type people, the sheeple type people. They're all going to run themselves into the ground. They'll do what they're doing now. When society hasn't even collapsed. If anybody's been paying attention, society's collapsing around your ears in every major city in the United States, at least. Just paying attention here, if that's all you do, and you don't pay attention to what's going on in the rest of the world, you just pay attention to what's going on in America, like a lot of Americans do, what's on TV, what's on the news, what's going on here. You would see that all over the place, people are just stealing what they want. They're flash mobbing stores. People are getting shot because they're becoming a lot of people in the public are becoming perpetual line steppers, meaning they know the rules of society, but yet they want to step over those lines anyway and cause chaos. There's different groups that no longer even believe in the system here at all. Like none of it, like even in the way that the United States has always been self-sufficient. And, since the World War II, we were known around the world for a manufacturing giant that, look at the military that we put out in World War II in just a few short years, not unlike the other side, which also did it. So there's some conspiracy behind that if you want to look into who funded both sides of World War II. I mean, literally some of the same families on both sides. So it was obviously line drawing. And so in today's world, you can see that. So when they're ready for an area to collapse, they're ready for it to collapse. And all signs indicate that they are using certain countries in certain areas to destabilize the entire area. And it's not just going on like, in one part of the world, like North America or South America, Europe, Asia, Africa. No, it's happening worldwide, destabilization. And they're using war. They're using draconian measures from the governments to accomplish this. And the areas where people do not listen to the governments, they're just using war and warlords. And if you've paid attention to some of the escapades of the U.S. military in Africa into supposedly fighting warlords. And then like NATO and the UN would deliver all this food to people that are starving. And then it would just end up in the hands of a few guys with military trucks, armored vehicles, and a lot of guys with AK-47s. So that was the real government, despite the actual government that wasn't coming to anyone's aid. So in the U.S., considering that there's 80 million legal guns out there that they know about, not to mention all the extra guns that people don't report or bought or traded or found or it was inherited from So I'm estimating there's probably at least 200 million more guns of various types in the U.S. So if they manage to fracture it here or turn off the system, it is going to be a war unlike any other war. So the only one really to compare it to, I guess, would be the Civil War, where there were groups of people moving through forest, coming into towns, villages, and farmhouses, ranch houses, of people trying to just live their life out there. They really didn't know what was going on, in the world or none of that stuff. But the war still came to their front yard. And then, when people die, people get upset. So if there's massive groups out there stealing stuff from people and a few people get shot, guess what? They got a cousin, they got a dad, they got an uncle, they get their feelings hurt, they go arm theirself. And then you have like the Hatfield McCoy type thing where they were just going to stretch a civil war, for years. It could have been horrible. So anybody thinking that it'll be like that as far as the mass amounts of millions of people in the cities, it ain't going to be like that. Those people are going to take care of themselves because they don't know how to function on Earth. But there will be other groups that do know how to function and that are armed and that will take. I mean, that's just zombie movie 101, right? You ever notice that all of these Hollywood types are anti-gun and they don't like the Second Amendment and they don't like free speech, yet they make movies and they put out all of this racist content, and then in the movies they try to play certain characters that are really the other side of the spectrum from the person that they are. So they like to play the patriot, they like to play the guy with the gun that saves everybody, and then because common sense, they can't make a movie where they don't make the point for the Second Amendment right there in the movie every time, despite them all being leftists, them all being against it. They'll make a movie like, say, for example, The Walking Dead. If you've watched that, the very first rule in that they figure out is never let anybody take their protection away from them or they will be victims immediately. So it's like that in real life. So if something happened here in the U.S. right now, I'm just going to see a mass starvation and craziness going on in the cities, and people that know how to produce are going to take that as a trigger, and they're gonna beef up their security, and they're gonna call their neighbors, and they're gonna ask their neighbors, hey, what are you gonna do? Things like that'll happen, and it'll be horrible. I mean, in my opinion. Now, if we just get blacked out from another country, people are so selfish and crazy that would happen too. So if you imagine if they twist a little political spin inside of anything that's going to happen, which I was saying, mark my words, there's going to be hacks, because that's what the elite are all warning about. The next big thing is going to be hackers. They're going to shut down the infrastructure. Hackers are going to disrupt the food supply or the energy supply or something. And you just think about that. So they got this political thing out there. They could use anything they want. And I want you to take an example of the Gulf of Tonkin in Vietnam. And, what happened there? They used something there that they made it political. It didn't even really happen. And then if you want to go back even further, how about 1947, just, when we got bombed? I mean, I'm sorry, 1941, the infamy day, right? We lined up all our ships in a row. The president of the United States was informed that the Japanese were going to bomb it, and he decided just not to tell anybody. We'll just keep it amongst us, and they just happened to line up all our old boats in a row on the pier, so they all got blown up with a great excuse to go to war politically and also steal a bunch more money. Now, does that sound a little bit familiar to what's going on in the Ukraine? It's like that guy's always on TV, and he's like, look what I can do. I work at home, and I make billions of dollars. He's like how's he getting all this money from everywhere? And then, they put out all this propaganda all the last year and everything, and then the leakers leak, right? And then we find out really what's going on, and the Russians are wiping them out. Is the truth. That's what's going on. There's like 70, 80,000 or more wiped out of the Ukrainians, and the accurate number for the Russians is only about 15K. That's way different than what's been on all the news and all this stuff. I don't know. It's getting spicy out there. So that's why I'm trying to, kind of at the same time pay attention, but ignore it. I just want to farm and then eat good. And when you go camping or when you leave your house for the last time because you have to, remember, eat a good meal first and then leave. Take some of the weight inside your belly and get some energy. What was that old saying? You got miles to run before you sleep, miles to run before you sleep, or something like that. I think that might actually be a scenario, but I hope it's not. And I hope we just keep delaying it and kicking the can and delaying it and kicking the can, and everybody's scared to pull off the great reset because people are on to their game. I mean, I'm seeing it everywhere. People understand what's going on, but I don't know how small of a fraction that is out there that actually pays attention to what's going on and isn't behind a lens of censorship, where they actually think that they're very intelligent, up to date with the facts people, because they listen to their authoritative sources all the time. And those are the same people that have been given bad advice for a really long time. So I don't know. I'm not listening to them. I'm trying to stockpile. Like it's, I feel like maybe they should play that 50s propaganda now, which they kind of did. If you saw last year when they oddly just came out with a public service announcement for New York people, in case of a nuclear bomb, go in the center of your building and put your head between your legs and grab the flotation device. And, all of that. It was the same thing as the old duck and cover. Just get under your kitchen table, wrap yourself with the tablecloth, and you'll be fine.
Are those cheaply made fabrics from China with a tablecloth, or do we get some quality cotton made in the United States? It's going to be a different kiss your ass goodbye, isn't it? Like, just the absurdity of everything that seems to be happening today of, one thing is said, they continue to try to have you consume more. Corporations are still pumping. And suddenly there's a cutoff. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon no longer allowed to even send representatives to China at all, not even allowed in the country. No more chip exports, no more rare earth exports, no more refined heavy earths, nothing. So you got to think about instantly put what those two companies at a disadvantage. So China's reversing exactly what we were doing with something like Iran, with you're not allowed to sell to them, barter with them, trade with them, anything with them. So China just did that with Raytheon and Lockheed Martin. No more nothing for any of these companies. Anything in the Chinese sphere of influence, from any factory to any banking institution, any ship that sails Chinese waters out into international and back, anything associated with trade routes along the Belt and Road Initiative or anything, completely cut off for those two companies. I'll talk about slashing one of the heads off of the beast. I mean, normally even talking of that, and there would be an invasion into a country already. But see, now that you got to wonder how much of it's cat and mouse, how much of it's just planned theatric, Beijing theater, Jingju is what they call that, Beijing opera. Because you got to think, the reliance on China and Taiwan for all exports for high tech, like F-35s, for example. All those parts and products were not made in the United States for our own military. They were made with most people had projected 15, 20 years from now, China was going to be, at loggerheads with America anyway. Like you could see that 20 years ago. And still, the majority of the lion's share of everything you need to get, like high-tech gear, fighters, missiles, anti-aircraft, whatever, shoulder launch, it all requires chips and things that are made from China, rare earth minerals. But see, just that alone, like put all of it in the hands of somewhere else, outside of your control or sphere of influence or control. It's just maniacal, nonsensical. Cartoon vehicle kind of style. So now what? Then that just means the linchpin for Taiwan is just amplified like 50x, because that's a place like Lockheed Martin. That's the place Raytheon is the only last place they can get chips. Yeah, Japan, a little bit. Korea, yeah, some. When you think of the behemoth of exports of these types of only produced in one place in the world, high quality chips, that's semiconductor chips. Really, you have to wonder, is this just a planned chaos and these true families at the top? I've heard them termed as white dragon families, black dragon family, red dragon family, that have been in control. And, the serpent energies and the serpent dragons as such, off-world entities, if you will, no different than Viracocha or something else that seems to be extraterrestrial, extra-human, has seemed to be in control, even in Chinese society, since the beginning. So you have to wonder at the highest echelons, because you think about in, what we consider Western culture, and like where way beyond anything Sassoon or Rockefeller family, like way up, like the controllers of those families. See, at the top, once you get to that level, then whether it's the white dragon or red dragon families of China or the controllers of the sovereign bank owners and that type of wealthy elite that then tell the minions what to do to structure society. Like when you're up at that level, you're both something else. And you're not human. You're not in the society. You don't care what happens to the humans. It's just a farm. They're just breeding stock. They're just a resource. Human resources. Makes sense. Follow the lexicon. But let's say you're at that extra off-planet level. Then would it not make it where you would cooperate to get the end result to set up the new world? So it might appear that they're arch enemies, but in reality, it's all being scripted for creating the most chaos possible. Because everything we see is a bonehead move, so it's only planned to create chaos. I was saying on my program last week over on Brighteon TV, Mike Adams there, Friday afternoons, 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time, that we're entering the chaos phase right now. Like 2020, 2021, 22, that was the phase where nobody blinked an eye when the most money was printed ever in human history. Half the world's money was printed in those 3 years. And it took 3,000 years to bring it to that point. And then half of all the wealth created in printing form occurred in just 3 years, doubling the world's money supply. And then all the goods went underground, or there was always shortages for us here, but then the supply chains were rerouted with all that extra money to fill them up for continuity government. Now the chaos phase needs to ensue for all the people involved so far with the distraction to keep us unprepared, can run and skedaddle out to their whatever hideaways, let's term it that. And with all the Zoom and all the tech and all the new AI, faces, and these people do not exist faces. And I'm, taking a look at AI itself, how far it's progressed. It's shocking. I'm already at the point where realizing if I don't use it, even though I dabbled in it the last 6 months, like at the speed tech moves now, I'm 6 years behind because I wasn't on it from day one these last 6 months. Catching up on 6 years, even though it's been 6 months. These people are going to run away and leave whatever holding the bag. But the distraction of the rice is to explain away food shortages. And from there, it'll morph into more food shortages. Watch how it goes. I get a pretty clear picture of this rice thing. Okay, it's got to be the basic excuse. Everybody understands rice shortage. But as this ozone depletion event continues and really starts to get strong and really starts to damage crops across the southern hemisphere, depending if they're in their planting phase or if they're in their first emergence or if they're coming into like late maturity, whatever, things are going to start to get whacked. Now imagine riding on top of that. There's already a rice shortage. Oh no, there's an ozone depletion. There's UVB radiation hitting the ground. Oh my gosh, we just lost 90% of the world's barley crop in the southern hemisphere. wouldn't be the world's, but the southern hemisphere crop, and they'll give a percentage like we lost half the barley crop. Oh no, and the rice shortage. Oh, it's catastrophic. It's the global famine. The horse has ridden. So how would you frame that, and how would you take advantage of chaos? Because think about it. Like I was saying, every single movie you've ever seen, you're usually like a distraction explosion in an adventure movie where they're breaking somebody out or they're doing a heist and a getaway or whatever. There's usually a big boom. That's everybody looks that way. It's misdirection, and they go that way. Exit stage left. And it seems like a lot of the elite, those in charge of the banking families, and I got all distracted there. The AI is what I really was trying to come at is you won't even know if they're not there. Because if it's all closed door hearings and meetings and the supposed reporters, unless you really met a few reporters, you know, the AP, yeah, really? Are they really? Or are they computer generated personalities and imagery that was written? I mean, how often do you get invited? Like, raise your hand. Do you really know somebody who works at the New York Times, Washington Post, BBC? Do you know a person personally that works over at, you know, pick your newsletter of choice or your newspaper of choice. I mean, how much of it do they, and again, do they know every single person in the company? Thousands of reporters, thousands of people working in these companies. You think every single reporter knows every single reporter? I mean, how much of it's truly a person? Because the same fictitious with the politicians, could they not have standalones? Now think about this. They're doing everything by screens anyway today. So you look at some of these big meetings in what would be The Hague or some places in Europe, and you're looking up at like a screen board of 16 screens and just like one person's there. That's what I mean. Like, are they even there? They're getting away and using tech like as an interim layer between us and them. The distraction is like a 3-month press the red button, eject happening right now. So I couldn't see how these two events with the rice and the ozone hole depletion event don't go in tandem. So that gives us a pretty good timeline of now to August is all that is left before. This was going to cause a real disturbance in the food supply anyway. I mean, really it was. I mean, no BS assessment. That's why I've been talking about it for the last year. In addition to the grand solar minimum, because grand solar minimum generally brings on higher seismicity, higher magnitude earthquakes, and larger volcanic eruptions with a higher volcanic explosivity index attached to them. And we're just seeing it. We saw that, you know, the next Russian, if you go to Windy, if anybody's out there and wants to take a look at the sulfur dioxide that came out of the eruption there in Shiveluch in the Kamchatka Peninsula, please go to Windy, WINDY.com. That's a wind earth model. And if you'll see a first tab, it'll be on your right side. It'll have like temperature and that thing. You go to the bottom, there's some dots there. Click that and it'll say more layers. And then you want to come down to sulfur dioxide. And you actually don't click the toggle button, actually click the word that says sulfur dioxide. And you can see how much is spitting, and it is tremendous, the amount of sulfur dioxide. It blows my mind how much and how vast and how quickly it's already swirled up to 90 north. It's already up there. That's the whole thing. That eruption was just a week ago, and that sulfur dioxide, light blocking particle kind, is already at the North Pole. And just these vast clouds of this stuff swirling around the northern hemisphere from like 59 degrees north latitude all the way to the Arctic Circle. Like, this is truly an event coming in here. Now we got the southern hemisphere, Hungatonga eruption, UVB, huge amounts of water vapor in the atmosphere, a lot of it equatorial, ruining crops. And then we got this new eruption, Shiveluch, 68,000 feet. Some say 72,000, averages somewhere 65 to 68,000 feet. That's another huge one. When these arc storms continue and Tulare Lake's refilling over in California, just ag across the world is just generally not doing the best because all of the extremes we're encountering. This is going to amplify in a quick fashion, like super quick. October 2024, the ultimate in the magnetic canceling waves and the disturbance in our magnetic field here on the planet will occur then. So between now and then, it's going to get stranger and stranger and stranger. So you can see how if you were the elite, it's time for you to bail. You got less than 2 years. Everything has been milked already wealth-wise. And how do you distract the populace while you get out? We have to have the appearance that there's still meetings going on. Again, it comes back to the AI and the screen time and the screen faces. I don't know, man. It's a weird world we're living in. I mean, what is real? What is not real? Hey, Ransom, I couldn't hear you.
None of it's real. It's all computer generated. No, I was trying to pull up this article, but for some reason it wouldn't show up. But it's talking about exactly what you were talking about. It's from The Guardian. It's the Schumacher family planning legal action over AI interview with F1 great that never happened. So basically his family suing because he's a real private guy and he stays to himself. But this German weekly magazine had an interview with him. But it was generated by artificial intelligence. And, so we're in a time right now, what you were talking about, are they even there? Well, who knows? Because they have been known in media and other places to just make up names. And this is before the AI was controlling a lot of stuff. But the AI is so convincing that schools it's revolutionizing the world right now. The thing about AI is it doesn't have anything new. It can't produce anything new. It can only take what's inputted into it by whoever its programmers are, plus the amount of information that it's allowed to acquire from the open internet. So if they, so whenever they, you go to one of these sites, which I played with a lot, like Dolly or some of these other things that give you AI computer generated images of the ideas that you put in it, what you'll see is that you don't see any new ideas. You see combinations of what's out there on the internet. So like if you put heaven, it'll show you pictures of angels and rainbows and clouds. And if you, if you put demons, it'll show you demons. If you put aliens, it'll show you aliens. And the same thing for the ones that are typing and saying stuff. They give it a feed of information, and then they give it some parameters, and it spits out an amalgamation of what humans put into it. So it's not like to the level where it's thinking yet, or at least they're not letting us know that. And that may be the delusion or illusion that's out there, is that that's not happening, when I think it probably is. And like I've said, they have shown that these things are writing movie scripts, they're writing presidential speeches, they are writing the news. So the people that are up there, real or AI, they're reading off a feed. It's a teleprompter of some source somewhere all the time that just goes up ever into this pyramid. And you can see this pyramid whether you look at the food corporations and how they're set up, the media corporations, how they're set up, or the military industrial complex pyramid. If you look at it, you'll find out it just keeps going up and up in a more narrow pyramid until there's very few, if any, people actually running these things. So I don't know that. So you talked about a lot, basically aliens to AI to, different stuff. And I was going to talk about this rice. I'm going to tell you exactly what's going on with rice, because it just so happens that before they started announcing to everybody that there's a global rice shortage, there was this other idea out right before it that rice is to blame for around 10% of global emissions of methane and gas that is over 2 decades traps about 80 times much heat as carbon dioxide, scientists say. So if the world wants to reduce greenhouse emissions, we can't eat the rice. Now, think about this for a second, though. So they're saying basically here that rice is bad for the planet. It sums it up. And then, I think the title of that was "Rice Cannot Be Ignored." And then all of a sudden they come out with this, well, there's a rice shortage. So they're talking about the idea of banning growing rice. And then they say there's a rice shortage. And, if you look into that, who eats the rice? Who eats the rice that we're talking about? Well, rice is one of the most important staple foods in the world. Over 50% of the world's population depend on rice, and about 80% of the food requirements and about 95% of global output of rice comes out of developing countries. In other words, countries that are having super strife right now. that's who's growing the rice, right? So we're coming into a circumstance just like the wheat. And then, the militaries are slowly leaking, drip, 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 all of these videos that they're saying, well, we don't know what that is. It's more high tech than our high tech. So they keep showing these videos basically of our technology flying over a third world country, spying on people, and then some other higher technology thing flying through the frame, and they say, well, we don't know what it is, because they're leaking this idea that they're keeping this as a what is that, the wild card on Uno, or the ace up their sleeve. If all else fails, world hunger, World War III, disease, blah blah blah, they have this idea that they're just going to convince everyone that well, there's aliens. So you need to let us have control totally of your life, the entire human species at risk. I think that's their backup plan from the, we're all going to die from carbon dioxide thing. But think about that. So what they're saying is that one of the biggest, most oldest known food staples of the world is, next they'll be saying it's racist, but for right now, it's just bad for the environment, kind of like cow farts. So that means you can't eat beef. And, when the animals and the pigs and everybody, they poop in the environment, it causes nitrogen or something. I'm not a scientist. I'm not even that good at reciting their things, but it's always something that isn't a direct attack on food production and the human lifestyle as it's been on the planet for the last, I don't know, I'm going to say million years, because in my opinion, whenever you study anthropology, and it's another thing that's so weird, there's anthropology and then there's genetic science. And if you follow both, you'll realize that they don't agree about much of anything. All the way from evolution to where human beings came from, at what times they showed up, etc. What we are as a species. Like they admit in one group that we're 5 different species mixed together, and then in another group is trying to convince you of a story where we're all homogenous people that came from a specific spot at a specific time. From religions to science, they're giving you these alternate stories. And then when you really, scan through most of these articles about scientists, you realize, well, this peer-reviewed paper says this. And then you think about it just critically for a minute. A peer-reviewed paper is a paper where a bunch of people all said the same exact thing and not one of them had a dissenting opinion or, anything like that. So that's not even science. That's like groupthink or kind of like a religious setup. So when they're talking about all of these facts and figures, and I'm thinking on your trip, I don't care what man is producing on carbon dioxide. What did the volcanoes just spew out? How much carbon dioxide came out of that thing? How much water and material did that? Because when I actually study into human history, I know that the only times we really did bad is when the earth started burping stuff up, or the sun decided, you know what, we're going to put you guys on break for a while. So that's what I'm really worried about. But the AI is the distraction. It's like a disease or a cancerous virus that's working its way through civilization. And what do they want for the third world countries too? Is for us to infiltrate them, destabilize them, and then offer them fried chicken and cell phones with 5G coverage for everyone, because that's something you can eat. It's this spy device. And by the way, the U.S. government is double, triple, quadruple down. I don't know how much it is, but they're going to admittedly put up more eyes in the sky over a city near you. In other words, lots of drones flying around, watching you, keeping track of you, following your social media feeds and scoring you appropriately in a secret folder somewhere, and keeping track of who you are and what you do and where you shop and where you go and what you buy and how much you buy and what your patterns are, because all of that's being put into, this big database of what they cried in the past was just metadata. Don't worry, it's just metadata. We're not really spying on you. But now they are putting more eyes up in the sky, and they're interlinking this entire system. And then you see the countries of the world changing their financial format. They're moving over to a different money. And there are whispers in Mexico that they may also join the BRICS because, that would be great for the U.S., right? One of our biggest trading partners that supplies a lot of our food just all of a sudden goes to a different money that we're not using. And also at the same time, there's all of these rising violent cartels controlling the food market. because they're not really worried about drugs no more. And that should be something that should be raising some eyebrows right there, is why is the cartel moving from a drug business over to a food business? Why do they care who grows the avocados? Who cares who's growing the corn and the other things in Mexico? Well, evidently the cartels do. And maybe that's part of a destabilization program, or maybe they're just really smart business people that see the same trends that we're talking about, where the food is the market is being sewn up. And so people in America we need to not fast forward, but rewind in time to back when we made everything for ourselves, and everybody was a jack of all trades, and every yard had something growing in it that was basically organic, because they just planted it and let it grow like that. I'm hoping that we go back to that, but I just don't see it happening. There's, I don't know, like I said, about 7.5 billion people that don't have a clue.
Well, they will get a clue soon. Now, please remember, in the beginning here of the show, we were saying really how much do you need to get ready for, to prep out, to, prepare for. Depends how remote you might be and how many people you have working with you and how long you think the event may last. Now, for me, this is just my own mind, so it's helping me try to get prepared and plan for things. This magnetic field anomaly will be here in October of 2024. Most of what we're seeing in the chaos of the economy, the society itself, that will all be done with, because when it comes to the basics, people are going to sweep all that, aside and just start doing things like growing food, and it won't matter. All these things that we're making matter right now that have no relevance except to distract you. Like that period of time from rice shortage to ozone. See, here's the thing, then it's August, September, October, November, and it will be a super extended season into December, which is actually into October of 20, or is actually January of 2024. So between then, you're already only 10 months away from this next biggest event. So imagine these two huge events coupling through the Christmas season. Suddenly we're in 2024. Well, then the biggest of the event of this magnetic field will occur in October of that, whatever form that takes. But realize also that every day after that, the magnetic field is strengthening and that magnetic field anomaly is weakening. Every day, every month, every year that we go past that date, there'll be more stabilization in the atmosphere and the magnetic field of the planet. My problem is, after we come out of this October 2024 thing, you have to visualize, like if you're standing on the Earth and you're looking at the outer solar system, you're going to see Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune from the Earth perceived as a perfect square. Like your visual looking at that would be a square out there. All the gravitational bodies directly behind it. Like you're standing there, you're looking directly at that. Well, the Earth's, and then the sun's between the middle of us. So the Earth's between four magnetic giants forming this square. We're in the middle and the sun's behind us. So this huge transference of electromagnetic current and possibility, that potentiality or potential is what they call it. The size and scope and breadth that it could run to. We're going to swing outside of that. We won't be in the middle anymore, but we'll be in front of the sun. Just mere months later, Earth will be the only thing out in front of the entire solar system with all the big gravitational bodies, the sun and all those gas giants and things in our solar system that usually pull huge amounts of space debris into them anyway. Everything's directly behind us at that point in 2025, probably around April, May. And we're going to sit in the middle of that bombardment trajectory for about 6 months. We'll swing back on the backside of the sun, come into the middle end of 2026. We'll be back behind the sun, which will give us a respite, and we'll get like 6 months of calm where there'll be no more like bolides and fireballs from the sky and crazy stuff like this happening. And those gas giants will start separating even further. So a year after that, you won't notice the square any longer. It'll definitely be dissipating. But we'll have to go through one more round of it, and it just depends on how thick of debris of space it is. But see, at that point, then the planets are off to the side. And they're also grabbing stuff, a glancing blow, if you will. They'll pull a bunch of stuff off the glance off to the side there. But that's kind of it. And then the magnetic field stabilizes after that point. And then the planting and harvesting dates can be known again and prepared for. But between now and that, they're going to try to blame humanity for that all natural cycle. It's a natural reset. See, that's the thing. Natural reset. The elitists somehow understood this. They knew the time it was onsetting. They knew the duration of it, the intensity, and they're ready to go. What you're witnessing is riding on top of a natural cycle to achieve a greater outcome. It's what you are witnessing in front of you daily in the news. This chaos of our atmosphere, this upsetting and of the agitation and the cavitation of our planet's weather systems is a natural fact. It's happening because of volcanic activity and electromagnetic activity. It itself has a cycle and onset. It is known. But where do we sit in 2027 or 2028 coming out of it is more the question. Like, okay, let's say you got ready for the next 5 years. You had enough stuff where you could grow seeds, and you had enough things where you could repair, and you were able to think about repairing and restocking stocks. And that was your game plan from the beginning. All right, you got it wired out 5, 6, 7 years. Okay, now you come out in 2029, then what? I mean, there'll be very few people compared to today. The elitists will have run underground, and they'll probably be emerging at that point with some sort of probably armed forces to try to recontrol everything. Monetary system would be intact in a digital form still. They're going to pop out of the woodwork, and then what? Start making everybody. There won't be any more. Every records office will be totally gone by this point. There'll be no more records of such as we understand them. Like, there might be some random documents laying around, but in terms of identifying people with it, where everybody's got ID cards and driver's licenses, and they can be checked in a database and things instantly now. That storage, those storage facilities of data will be gone during these events. So it'll really pop us back in like the 1860s again. You might just be lucky enough to have your driver's license with you. Maybe you don't. How do you identify yourself? Don't know. We got no more electronic records. Everything has been shorted out or smashed with cometary debris and fragments of bolides across the planet, including the floods and the high winds, and the grapefruit and bowling ball-sized hail, which is next. Bowling ball-sized hail comes next. That's a scary thing. Grapefruit size was always predicted as a precursor to the bowling ball-sized hail. Now, when you get this first event of the bowling ball-sized hail, so this is a good marker in time. Like, what is the exponential ramp up rate with the collapsing magnetic field? Is it going to be grapefruit size this week, and in 2 months it's at bowling ball size? Or is it going to be another 2 years until that happens? Like, what is going to survive of our present society as we march through the rest of this stuff? You lose electricity, you start to live off the land a bit. You know how to grow your food. You got people that know basic welding skills. You got some people like country doctors that have, and you're still able to get some medicines at people's stocks and stores around in communities. Hold on for 5 years, 10 years, and then what? You're back into the digital monetary system after this event's finished? Or does it stay like the 1860s? We rebuild and we live the rest of our lives wherever we are, whatever happens. And then in 50 years, they don't tell anybody, or 100 years, in 2120, you'll never know that there was anything natural that disrupted our society. It'll purely be war and famine. And like Buck Rogers, we wake up 400 years later and go, no way, that is so incorrect. I lived during that time period. There was not just war and famine. There was all these natural things happening too. The magnetic field was collapsing. The ozone hole had depleted. There was UVB radiation. massive mud floods, global liquefaction events. And you know, the way history is written, there'll be nigh a peep of natural cataclysm in here. And people will be walking around and go, wow, look at all these buildings that they were built in the same retro style. And be like, no, it was just a global civilization. We all built the same way, and then it got wiped back several hundred years because of natural calamities. Oh, that wasn't the history I lived. I mean, they changed the history book. Oh, yeah, they did. Ransom, I could go on forever about mud floods, man. Take us out of the show. Or did you bail early, man? I'm curious. Anyway, I was looking at this map here, topographic map with electric geology fingerprints all over it. I don't know why a rooster's crowing right now. It makes no sense. Go to sleep.
It's in the morning. They're trying to wake you up.
It's not even mid crowing.
He's like, hurry up. Let's start the day. No, I was actually, I thought I unmuted myself. I'm sorry. I was reading this, little thing from Newton that, where he was predicting an Armageddon style end of the earth about 2060. And recently I just read, what was it? Is it DW 2023 that's supposed to show up in, I think it's 2046 on Valentine's Day. I think that'd be February 14th. So February 14th, 2046, 1 in 600 chance that this rock will smack. And I've seen another estimate of 1 in 500. So in astronomical terms, this is, a lot. That's a really good odds that it's going to smack into the earth compared to like 1 in a million or, stuff like that. However, if you start reading about it, what they say is that, there's 1 in 500 chance because they don't really know exactly the path it's going to be coming in because they can't predict it because it's going to fly by the moon several times, which is going to alter its trajectory. And we know that there's 9 other close approaches in the next couple of years. I think, was it 2053 or something like that? But I thought how ironic that was that those dates are so close together. And I always think about these scenarios. A lot of people say, "Oh, well, you're doom and gloom, and it's not all going to happen. Not in our lifetimes or whatever." Well, I'm not even really worried about my lifetime because I'm sure I can run off to the woods, and at least myself personally, I know how to rough it. I know how to go hungry. I know how to deal with it. I know how to wait. I know what to look for. I'll be fine. What I'm thinking about is the next 30 years or so of what kind of world is going to be created by the events of today and any kind of anything, volcanoes, government upheaval, you name it, food shortages, is going to change the way the world is for my children and possibly grandchildren. So when I'm thinking about prepping or when I'm thinking about other things, I'm not really thinking about myself so much is how will I get the people I care about through a time period? Like, what am I going to do with how am I going to feed them? What are they going to eat? Because, I don't think any parent in the world wants to look at their kid starving to death. And obviously people will go crazy and do crazy things over this idea. So better not go crazy and just plan ahead. Not for yourself. It's the same way with, how people thought you brought up the Civil War. A lot of the families then did the same thing. They jarred, they saved ammunition, they saved this and that. They viewed their farm as an investment into the future where their children and grandchildren might live someday on it and have a similar lifestyle and wouldn't have to build from scratch. And they would have a little bit of resources handed down to them, inherited down. Now, in today's world, almost all of the inherited knowledge, wealth, etc., has been spent, has been, as my grandparents would say, pissed away. And so it's kind of gone. And now we got to think about building this society again and doing it not for yourself, but for other people, for the future, if you want there to be a future, which brings me back to the state. What happens if this, rock actually did hit the ground? Well, it would cause mass devastation, even being a small, type of thing. I forgot how big it is. It's not very big. I think it's, let me see. Here it is. And this thing is traveling at, 25 miles per second. If you can imagine how fast that is, it's like, it's gone. So if it did hit, it would cause an issue. And it wouldn't just cause an issue for like a year or 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. We're talking decades. And it's something like what you were talking about. But I thought it was ironic that these dates they give 2047, 2046, and 2054. In that time period, this object will come by the Earth and near miss it or fly around it if we're lucky, 9 different occasions. But they admit that they have no idea if it's going to smack the Earth or just fly past it, because they don't know how to predict how it will change with the moon's gravity or, the orientation of what's going on when it finally gets around. And this is just a small rock. It's only like 160 feet wide or something like that. So if you can imagine a 50-meter diameter rock hitting a mile at 25 miles a second, that'll be a little boom boom. Now, it's not a extinction event, but it definitely would change the course of human history, not unlike the volcanoes that we've been seeing erupt. And I think there's going to be an accumulative effect of that.
I think ash is going to layer on top of ash. Water on top.
Thank you for listening to